Somebody calling? There's somebody.
Hello?
Hello, how are you?
Okay, hold on.
He should. Well, maybe not. I don't know. He's away, so I'm not sure.
To an automatic voice message system.
Okay. He's probably not going.
Are you there, Sharon?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have you both now, right?
Okay.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we're going to start the work session. Roll call, please.
Mr. Berminski?
Present.
Mr. Haas?
Here.
Ms. Hauk? Here. Mr. Perry?
Hello.
Here.
Mrs. Edmond? Here. Mr. Schnee?
Present.
Mr. Urban?
Here.
Mr. Vogt?
Here.
Ms. Wakes? Present. Mr. McGinley?
Present. 10 present. Any additions or deletions from the work session agenda? Okay. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Swakis.
Second.
Second, Mr. Snee. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have a rather lengthy work session, so I want to do a couple things. Mr. Berzini asked me if he could go first because he has another engagement this evening, so we'll have Mr. Berzina first, and that would be on the number 12 on the back side. And before that, Mr. Makowski, please comment on the executive session, please.
I can confirm prior to the work session, there was an executive session held for litigation purposes.
Thank you. Mr. Berzina?
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight representing the municipalities of Jenkins Township, Plains Township, and Conyngham Township. And I am the consultant that is involved with the county's Community Development CDBG DR program, which has acquired flood damaged properties throughout the floodplain. Since we have gotten underway with this program, we've acquired more than 130 properties. We still have another 25 to go. And then when you couple that with the nearly 200 properties that were acquired through the FEMA program, we have cleared an awful lot of those low-lying properties that today would certainly be casting a wary eye towards the Susquehanna River. The reason I'm here is that in each of those municipalities there is one property that was on the judicial sale list, 15 Stanton Street in Jenkins Township, 171 Courtwright Street in Plains Township, and 144 Lincoln Street in Conyngham Township. We submitted a request to both the school districts, all three of them, as well as this request to the county to abate those taxes. We had hoped in advance of that sale so that we could acquire those properties and demolish them. These are structures that were flooded in 2011 and remain in the same condition today that they were in 2011. The reason I'm here tonight is to hopefully expedite this so that we can move forward. One of the things that we did is that we included 2 of those properties in bid packages that were opened recently and awarded by the municipalities, and we'd like to get that work completed so that we can start to close out the entire program. I believe that we have provided all of the information to the county's legal staff, and they have provided that information to you. So we're requesting that you take action to move on abating the taxes on all 3 of those parcels. We have already received approvals from each of the individual municipalities, as well as the Nanticoke Area School District has provided us with the information. Wilkes-Barre Area School District has taken action at its May meeting, and Pittston Area School District is scheduled to have it on their agenda this month to take care of the Jenkins Township property. If there are any questions that you have, I'll certainly answer them for you.
Chair.
Questions, Mr. Haas?
Hey, Mr. Brazino, welcome. Thanks for what you do. You said the program is now closing out. Are these the last 3 properties in question?
No, these are 3 that we advanced. There are about 25 properties that have yet to be acquired simply because of difficulties with homeowners relocating, and we are going through a wait list of properties that had put their names on the list, and we're working our way systematically through to see the amount of available funds and the property that is most deserving at that point based on various criteria to move forward and acquire those as well.
Okay, and these are 100% federal funds?
These are 100% CDBG-DR HUD funds, yes.
Very good, follow through that. Okay, very good, thank you.
Question, who owns the 3 properties?
One was in Jenkins Township, was purchased by a gentleman from Louisiana sometime after the flood,
Okay.
I would guess sight unseen.
Okay.
The second one was a foreclosure in Plains Township, and the last one was again an individual who purchased the property in Conyngham Township after the flood event, not realizing the requirements that they would have to meet in order to comply with FEMA to re-inhabit that structure.
Okay. Are you paying those 3 people for the properties?
No.
You're just taking them for free?
What's going to happen is they would have been on the free and clear sale.
Okay.
We would take it and then do a private sale with the Tax Claim Bureau to acquire those properties.
Okay, so you're going to acquire them?
Yes.
Okay.
And they'll be in the township's name, each of the townships individually, and then those properties will have a deed restriction that they remain open space forever.
Right. So none of the 3 owners have any recourse against you?
Nope.
No.
So.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else?
So can I clarify, Mr. Chair? So two of these property owners, they bought the properties at a free and clear sale after the flood event.
They acquired them at some point. I don't know what sale, at some tax sale. I don't know if it was a free and clear sale or not, but they acquired them at some time post-2011, and now they are back on the list for free and clear.
But did they settle the payments then out prior to the properties? They paid the full amount? That was all taken?
No, that is why they're going to the free and clear sale.
The taxes, though? The
Yes,
taxes
they have not.
Okay. I'm saying, though, the purchase price, they paid the purchase price.
Whatever they acquired it for, yes.
Okay, so that was covered, it's just the taxes, okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you again.
Harry, if I could jump in, it's my understanding that these are going to be a private sale, and I believe it was in 2016, council passed a resolution wherein, in order to go to a private sale with Northeast Revenue, all the prior taxes would have to be paid. And I think that's the nature of his request here, coming here to abate the taxes, so that would lower the cost for the private sale through Northeast Revenue. Would that be correct?
Yeah, we're looking to acquire these properties so that we can, for the minimum cost to the program, so that we can acquire as many properties as possible with the remaining funds.
And these have already been exposed to an upset sale, so they'll be on the free and clear list, and that's where we're at in the process of that.
That's correct.
I mean, if I could, I really want to help out our municipalities in the floodplain, of course, and I just want to make sure that this doesn't set any precedent that other people take advantage of the program. Obviously, I'm sure you're doing your due diligence as well with that with that taking place, and we'd like to see people get out of harm's way.
Well, they'd have to
We
meet
could,
the
but-
eligibility requirements for the program in order to be in the program. So there are requirements that they must meet, right?
Right.
Anyone else? Okay, this will be on our next meeting date, which will be the 28th of August.
Thank you very much. Stay dry, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Sweats? Where's Mr. Sweats? Mr. Scherer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With us tonight are representatives from PFM. They're going to go over the annual debt overview. This is something they do on a yearly basis. Scott Chairman, Melissa Hughes, they've been here multiple times. So I'll let Scott go over the presentation. It already was in your council packet, so it's on the screen for the public, and it should be in your packet.
All yours, Scott.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Good evening. Again, Scott Shear with PFM and Melissa Hughes with PFM. Good to be back for our annual update on your debt overview. So we're going to go through the PowerPoint. I think we have a couple hard copies as well in case anybody needs, but hopefully everyone should be able to see what's on the screen. So feel free to stop and ask me any questions that you may have during the presentation. But just on the on the agenda, just a couple things that we want to talk about this evening. Number one, just a real brief overview of the county's existing debt portfolio. And then we'll talk about some opportunities or some potential future financings, one of those being a bond refinancing on 4 of the county's outstanding bond issues and note issues, and then talk a little bit about some potential new money needs that the county has, and then we'll end just on a real brief update on the county's credit rating. So as far as the existing debt portfolio, if you look at page 4, just lays it out a couple different ways. On the right-hand side is a bar chart that shows the total debt service. And when I talk about total debt service, that's principal and interest that's due on a calendar year basis. So you can see we're a little bit lower in 2018, a little over 20 million. And then it goes up a little under 25 million in 2019, and then it stabilizes out a little bit above 25 million thereafter. So again, we'll have another page that shows it in more numerical format, but this is just a quick illustration. 2029 is the last year of when all your debt fully matures. You can see it's kind of a partial payment in 2029. As far as on the left-hand side, with all the outstanding indebtedness of the county, we have it kind of broken out the way we draft the official statements. When you do a financing, we have some of the direct debt of the county, and you can see the top couple, or the 2017A and 2017B. Those are the ones we did last year. Pretty large refinancing where we just went from a higher rate to a lower rate. We did not change the structure of the transaction, didn't stretch it out. Also was able to release the debt service reserve fund that the county was holding for quite some time. And I think we were able to free, just based on the lower interest rates, somewhere around $9 million or so of net savings by going from a higher rate to a lower rate. And then by freeing up that reserve fund, that also provided about $5 million or so of relief. So that transaction worked out very well. Also supplied money for your energy savings project as well. The 2015 A and B bonds below there, those were the B bonds. That was a traditional refinancing, where again we just went from a higher rate to a lower rate on a couple of the outstanding issues of the county. And then the Series A of 15, the larger one, that was where we refunded some variable rate bonds and terminated one of the swaps, actually 2 of the swaps. It was the same kind but had 2 different pieces. And then prior to that, you see the 2009 and 2008 issues. Overall, total direct debt down at the bottom, about $211 million when this table was completed at the end of July. So just to put that in perspective, that's about, when you look at the total direct debt outstanding versus the legal capacity of the county, you're around 25% of the legal capacity, which is also cited in your credit rating reports that you're at a very manageable debt level when it comes to total outstanding debt compared to what your legal limit is. So just kind of food for thought as we're talking about potentially borrowing some new money, you're nowhere close to your legal borrowing capacity. We're not recommending you go up to your legal borrowing capacity, we're just saying you have a lot of room within that legal confine.
Can I just ask?
Sure.
The 5th item down under direct debt, is that a typo?
Yes, it should be 2009. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then on page 5 is basically a lot of the same information. This is now your debt portfolio shown a different way. This is now more numerical, where we lay out each one of the respective bond issues and note issues and the respective debt service. The columns that are highlighted in yellow, columns 4, 5, and 6, and 7, those, we'll get into that here in a few slides, but those are the 4 note and bond issues that are potential candidates for refinancing. Again, when I talk about refinancings or refundings, that's where we're just going from a higher rate to a lower rate, not lowering the not changing the payment structure at all, just keeping the same amortization. Those debt pieces that are highlighted, they all have relatively high interest rates, range from about 6.75 to an 8%, and we're just now getting to the point where they could be refinanced, and we'll get a little bit more into that. Overall, when you look in, let's see, right to the right of the ones in yellow, columns 8 and 9, those are, again, the 2015 2 different series that we did. The Series B, the one in column 9, those have a fixed interest rate of less than 3%, so that's locked in, very good interest rate. And the 2015 A bonds, the one that's terminated the swap, if you do not include the actual component for the swap termination, that amount, you locked in a rate a little less than 4%, so those debt instruments are very good. The 2017 transactions that we did in columns 10 through 13, those interest rates as well that are fixed through a traditional bond, they're a little less than 3% as well. So again, overall, the county's fixed rate debt portfolio looks very good. And again, then in column 17, you can see what the total debt service is, about 26 million out through 2029, and it drops off to about 11 million, and then debt-free. Page 6, just a real brief update on the county's debt swap portfolio. Again, back in 2015, we terminated the fixed payer swap component. There were 2 pieces to that. We left outstanding after a lot of discussions the basis swap components, and again, there's 2 pieces, one with PNC and one with JP Morgan. Just a couple points up top on slide 6. Those all became effective in June of 2013, although the trades themselves were actually put on many years before that when the county actually entered into it, but they did not become effective until 2013. They were originally related to the 2006 bonds and 03C bonds, and now most of it's related to the 2015 bonds. These basis swaps can be terminated at any point in time. We're always watching them. Right now, you'll see, we can terminate them. The termination value is probably one of the lowest that we've seen as far as the lowest negative value. So right now, down towards the bottom, kind of right below the squiggly lines, where the one would cost the county a little under $300,000 to terminate, and the other one would cost about $400,000. So right now, call it about $700,000 that the county would have to pay to terminate those. We've seen that as high as $1 million, $2 million, and even more. So again, yeah, it's about half of what it was last year. Again, no need to terminate at this point from a cash flow standpoint. And if you remember, sort of the reason why the county did this, and this was before our time, where the county did receive an upfront payment, and you see in the green there. For the one swap, is a little over $1 million, and for the other one, is about another $1.5 million. So the county received about $2.5 million, and in exchange, it's going to exchange cash flows with PNC and JP Morgan. Right now, the table in the middle is just kind of showing the monthly resets, where you see, let's just look, for example, at the PNC one, where the payment rate that the county is paying is a 1.29, the receipt rate is a 1.39, so that's all good. That means you're receiving a little bit more than what you're paying. Every month is a little bit different. Overall, I'd say since it's been effectuated in 2013, you're more or less about hunch. Again, there's some months where you're paying a little bit, some of the months that you're receiving a little bit. Overall, it's working as planned. So again, we'll continue to monitor that. If you want to proceed, with the financing next year for these other things that we're going to talk about, again, I think we should put that on the table to at least kick around, see if it makes sense to terminate it, and we'll talk about the pros and cons at that point. Getting into slide 8, the potential upcoming financing in 2019. Again, we mentioned that you have 4 different note bond issues outstanding that are callable in 2018 and 2019. Again, the plan would be similar to the way we wrote the ordinance, or your bond counsel wrote the ordinance on the 2017 transaction, is to include these bond issues for refinancings if a certain savings threshold is met. And whatever that threshold is, that's something we'll talk about at the right time. Maybe it's 2% savings, 3% savings, 4% savings. That's, again, for a later discussion. but that would be embedded into the ordinance if you decide to move forward with it. Again, not contemplating extending the term of the debt. So that's the refunding component or the refinancing component of the potential transaction for next year. Then below there, we have two different bullets. One for the planning that we've been working with the administration on for the 911 system upgrade. It may cost about $20 million. And then the bottom bullet point, the large one, may also need around $4 million to replace the voting machine. So those are sort of the two main components that we're looking at from a new money standpoint or new funding standpoint. Working with the administration on maybe identifying some grant opportunities. If you're able to get some, that's great. If not, we're kind of showing today maybe the worst case scenario where you have to finance everything, but maybe you can get some grant monies and get that amount financed down a little bit more, which will lower the.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here, Scott. Council, the reason why I asked Scott to, and Mr. Swenson, I asked Scott to include this section is because, listen, not only to give you an overview as to what our current debt structure is. And as you can see, it's been, for those of you who have been here since 2012, Harry and Linda and Tim, and Mr. Urban, that was $460-some million at that time. And now you're looking at $290 million. Obviously, the county's been making great strides with regard to our debt. We've been able to get through all of our budgets without borrowing. Up until last year, and we borrowed money in that one for the energy savings budget. So hopefully we'll get that money back in that guarantee come back. But we're working on grants for the 911 project. We've talked about this for now over a year in this room, probably longer. We talked about it for some time. We're at end of life in 2020 for our 911 project. And Mr. Rosencrantz is here, and he's going to talk to you a little more about what that means. It doesn't mean that everything's going to shut off on January 1st, 2020. It means that our support will be gone at that date. So we have to really start talking about a new radio system for 911. We're seeking out grants. We're continuing to do those things. We're going to do competitive an RFP if we decide to move forward with this, where hopefully that $20 million will be lessened. This is the worst case scenario, though, and I want to bring it to council's attention now. You will see that we're not looking to actually borrow this money, if we do it at all, up until June or July of next year, of 2019. But I wanted to let council know now as to what the debt would be and what those payments would be for budget purposes now, if this is what we want to do. Second component of that would be the $4 million for voting machines. Once again, a state mandate has come down. We talked about this in the past. We have to change to a paper ballot, have a contract in place to be changed for 2020. So that would be about $4 million for Luzerne County. Now, I'm hoping for voter reform. I'm hoping that the feds come through with regard to HAVA money. I'm hoping that we're doing all those types of things. But I've seen state mandates before, and I've seen them come back and forth in the county time and time again. CCAP has been working with us on the election machines, and they've been pretty great, and hopefully some of their legislation comes through. But once again, if we decide to borrow money, and we need to borrow money, this would be an opportunity to do so. Now finally, ladies and gentlemen, obviously we have $6 million in the reserve at this point. The county administration will not be touching that. So it's up to county council what you want to do with those funds at this time as well. Now I'll turn it back over to Scott. But I wanted to just preface this, Mr. Shearer's presentation by saying we are fully aware of how far we've come, but there are two major issues that we have to discuss, and that's what we want to bring forward to council now.
Thank you. So on page 9, again, this just highlights the refunding candidates. We already spoke quite a bit about those. The 2008Ds. 2008Es, their respective call dates are this November, and relatively small amount outstanding, about $1.7 million each for both of those. Higher rates, about 8%. The two below there, the 2009 notes and the 2009 bonds, about $5.5 million and $4.5 million. Again, high interest rates, about 6 3/4 and 7%. Those have call dates next November. So as Mr. Pedri mentioned, one thing that we're looking at is to create a finance plan where we only do one financing. So the county only incurs one set of issuance costs. So we're basically assuming this transaction, and you'll see from the timeline in a slide or two, would kind of start next summer. So that way we're sort of beyond the call date of the 2008 D and B bond, or D and E bonds by that point, and the 09 bonds and notes that are callable in November of next year, we're actually able to close on that transaction a few months prior, say in August. So that's where, and I think that would coincide nicely with the timing of your new money needs if you move forward with it. That next summer is when we really ramp things up and again try to achieve some economies of scale with the issuance cost on one issue by doing everything together. And then kind of what does all that mean from a savings perspective, from the refunding, from a new debt service impact from the new money? Page 10 and page 11, they both look very similar, but at the top of page 10, this assumes you go out and borrow $20 million. So maybe you still have the two projects, the 911 and the voting machine, but maybe you're able to find some grant monies, and at the end of the day, you only borrow about $20 million. So the blue column and the red column, those are the refunding transactions. Again, not extending the payment dates or anything, just going from a higher rate to a lower rate. And you can see down in column 10 that based on current interest rates, the net savings, and that's net of issuance cost, over the life of the issue would be about $1.7 million of total savings that the county would realize. So in round numbers, that's around $200,000 a year, give or take, in 2019 out through 2027. It's a pretty efficient refunding transaction, assuming the market holds out until that point in time. So that's just the refunding component. Then in the purple, there to the right, that would be basically borrowing about $20 million. And down in column 11, you see what that debt service impact would look like just from the new money borrowing. And again, just looking at column 11, you see that there is a small debt service impact in 2019 of about $125,000, and then a little under $1 million for about the next 9 years or so. And then you see the larger payments out in 2029 and 30, where the other debt pays off and matures in the county's debt portfolio. So column 12 would be what the new package would look like after the completion of the financing next summer. And then again, that's in column 12. So then column 13 would be the change. So we wanted to make sure you saw the holistic kind of model here of there's going to be some savings incorporated on an annual basis from the refunding, but also the new money. So basically in column 13, with these assumptions, there's an increase in your debt service of about $800,000, give or take, in 2020 through 2028 from where it's currently being budgeted at. So that's, again, borrowing basically a $20 million new money. And then on the next page, page 11, identical format, same kind of scenarios, but now instead of borrowing $20 million for the new money, we're showing $24 million. And now you see, to highlight Mr. Pedri's one comment, if you go to column 11, now if you borrow a few $1 million more, the payment in 2019 goes up a little bit, not dramatically, to about $150,000 of debt service impact from the new money borrowing, and then a little under $1.2 million thereafter, just when looking at the new money, not factoring in the refunding. So in column 13, now you see again what the total package looks like as far as the increase in the overall annual debt service. So a little bit of savings in 19, where you see that negative $148,000, and then again about $1 million or so of increased debt service thereafter.
And it's really important to consider that we're talking about a transaction that is a year away, so there will be interest rate risk between now and then. The market will change, so we'll come back a year from now and have a discussion about what the transaction looks like at that point.
So the footnote down at the bottom might be a little tricky to see. It says net savings, especially for the refunding, based on current rates subject to change. For instance, for every 10 basis points or 0.1% in the change in rates, whether up or down between now and then, that equates to about $60,000 of more savings or less savings, depending on where the rates go. So just, this is a snapshot in time right now. Well, we're assuming it's going to happen next year, but we're assuming today's rates, and as rates change, these numbers are going to change around a little bit, which obviously we come talk to you about starting next spring, next summer, if you'd want to ramp up the financing plan. So the timeline's a good segue into page 12 as far as the estimated timeline. Again, this evening, just here for overall debt overview and initial discussions. Then next June, so we have a little bit of time between now and then, kind of get your audit done, get your budget approved, see how your audit's coming for next year. Maybe in June, we do an authorization to proceed with the transaction, and that could be the refunding and the new money. Again, we'll talk about that next year, see how things shape up. Then you could consider a parameters ordinance in July next year, and then we'd probably lock in the rates in August, and then we'd close the transaction in September. So a very high-level timeline, but this just gives you an idea that we could potentially be back to talk to you late spring, early summer of 2019.
If I could, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Chair, if I could?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Chair, first of all, welcome to Wilkes-Barre. Thanks for coming out again.
You bet.
So, thanks for coming, guys. Could we have a third scenario if we don't have to borrow any money in the contingency that perhaps the federal and state governments do deliver to fulfill the mandates, and we actually find those pots of money by beating the bushes? Could we see that to it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Forward to us?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
I love that scenario.
That would be a good scenario. That would be a very good scenario. And lastly, on page 14, just a recap of the county's credit rating. So the current rating, as of the end of July of this year, we had a rating from Standard & Poor's of a BBB-. The county was last reviewed in October of last year when we did that financing that I talked about earlier. So that was good. That's when we got the county got the upgrade to the BBB-. Prior to last October, the rating was non-investment grade. That was a BB+ with that negative outlook. That began in 2015, November 2015. Prior to that, it was an investment grade rating. I think we all remember sort of what happened during that time frame. But again, right now the county is sitting with an investment grade rating, that BBB-. That's very good. We'd love to see it come up a little bit more, and maybe with the audit that we hear is going to coming out shortly, and the budget you're going to start working on. Maybe we're going to obviously push to see if we can get some movement next time we do a rating. Now, we won't, kind of with the timing of that, if you do a financing next summer, you'll definitely need to go back to the rating agency for a review and for a new rating. Now, between now and then, the rating agency may call us up and they may say, hey, we want to do our annual surveillance or an interim rating on the county. And so that may happen as well. So,
but that's not something we initiate,
right.
It's something they initiate.
They just always like to stay current, and since the last time they did the rating was October of last year, they try to touch their clients, if they can, on an annual basis. So maybe this fall they might reach out either to Dave or Brian or to us and say, hey, I want to have a call with the county, let's set it up. So at the latest, we would go back to them next summer when we go to do the financing. If you decide to move forward, it could also be as early as this fall for an interim update.
Questions?
Yes.
Is there any impact on the rating because the audit is not done yet? It's late?
No, more than likely not. So a couple things that we have to look at with that. It's a good question. So we're past the June 30 deadline per the charter for the audit. The investors and the rating agencies and the bond insurance companies, they don't look that closely at that. I mean, they may acknowledge it that you didn't meet the charter, but I don't see any negative impact on the rating. Now, what we also did, because the county's actually doing a very good job with their dissemination agent over the past couple of years on making sure that all the disclosure requirements are met for the investor community. And so there were some requirements. One of your bond issues had requirements that need to be filed by June 30th. And that includes, the audit and some other financials of the county. The rest of the bond issues, you need to have that information filed by the end of September, basically. So because the audit was not done by the end of June, basically we worked with the county and the dissemination agent to say that the county understands its filing requirement. The audit is not complete yet, but expects the audit to be complete late summer, early fall. So we basically still satisfied that requirement. And that's what the investors look at most is, okay, we understand the audit wasn't done. You notified us through the annual disclosure requirements that it's being worked on and it's coming at such and such date. So that's really the most important part. I think it would be, very beneficial to have it done, by the end of September when we hit those next kind of dates coming forward. So I think the next couple of weeks is going to be very important with how things come in line with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but as of now, by missing the charter deadline of June 30, that's not an issue. And then on the bottom of page 14, just a couple other excerpts from the last credit rating report, ways that the county could improve its rating, continue to implement the structural reforms in the long-term financial plans. I think the county's been doing a great job of implementing those. It's gone very noticed by the rating agency, by the investors, by the underwriters out there, so keep up the good work with that. improve budget flexibility and improve liquidity. That's sort of a signal of fund balance. And then ways the rating could weaken, adopt structurally imbalanced budgets. They're obviously going to be looking closely at the budget you're going to be working on here this fall. And if liquidity worsens, that's also going to be a factor, meaning drawdown of fund balance or continue the negative fund balance.
Fund balance and liquidity are related, but they're not the same. Fund balance is how much money you have on an ongoing basis. Liquidity is at any given point in the year, do you have enough money to meet, the next couple of months? Making sure there's no pinch points in the cash flow.
So those are the highlights that we wanted to bring up this evening. Happy to answer any of the questions that you may have.
Mr. Urban? Yeah, Scott, we initially hired you probably back in the actually mid-2000. Because the county didn't have any cash flow at the time because there was no reassessment done. We have that now. We have the ability to raise cash. I mean, you said we're only at about 25% of our borrowing capacity because we're only probably at 5, not at 6 mils yet, and we can go up to 25 mils in our taxing power. But I haven't seen any new recommendations from you regarding how we can save money. I'm looking at page number 4. Number 4, you show that next year the debt service payment's going to go up by about $3 million, and then the year after it's going to go up probably between 18 and 20. It's going to go up $5 million, and you're talking about adding another $750,000, so that's $6 million. Why don't you come back with some recommendations, show us how to save that $6 million, or how to come up with that $6 million in the county without raising taxes. I mean,
yeah, so the county, I mean, the good news is the county hit a home run in 2017 with that transaction. I mean, that saved a tremendous amount of money, which is great. Right. So we are coming back today to set the stage for some ways to save some money, and that's the refundings that we talked about.
It's small.
Yeah.
But they're not $5 and $6 million that we're going to need to make those payments in the future.
Right.
And so then another thing you said is that Wall Street's going to be looking at us, make sure we have liquidity and make sure we do the right thing. So they're going to be looking at this council to raise taxes, to raise the revenue, to keep the budgets growing, because I think that's what they like.
They like to see growing budgets. They like to see reserves. But as far as other options out there to save the county some money on its debt service, without stretching out the debt, which I don't think we want to talk about.
Not only the debt service, but looking at the operation of the county again, like you did.
Oh, outside of the debt service.
Like you did.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Like you did.
Sure, we can talk with
coming up with more recommendations for savings within the county. I mean,
we can get back to you on that. We'll talk with the administration.
One example is, the manager recommended and the council approved that like a 10% pay increase, 9 to 10% for most employees over the next 4 years. And when I asked why didn't we ask them to work more than 32.5 hours a week? The answer was, well, we'd have to pay them more. Well, you just got done paying them 10% more over 4 years and didn't ask them to do anything more. I mean, so I'd like you to look at the operation of county government under home rule to see if there's any savings, because it's a little bit different than the commissioner form.
Yeah, one thing that we can do, and again, there's no promises here at all, but yeah, obviously we'll take a look at that. One thing that we can talk with our other group that did those various initiatives for the county a couple years ago, maybe there might be some grant monies available to allow us to provide more insight to that as well. So we'll do some research and get back to Mr. Pedri on some potential opportunities with that.
And the other thing is, with this 911 borrowing $20 million, is that to cover not only the radio system but all the radios in every municipality's vehicle? Are we going to be responsible for all of that?
Mr. Urban, at the end of the work session, we're going to talk about that.
Okay, but if we're just giving them a bogey to go out and borrow for $20 million without that information.
Those are all estimates at this point. There's nothing.
I know.
Yeah, we would definitely fine tune that if and when we get to that point to borrow. We'd want to make sure we're borrowing the exact right amount for it.
The other question is, legally, can we use some of the 911 money that's coming in to pay the debt service off that's being borrowed for the new system? And then is that 911 fee at its maximum cap, or can that go up a little higher to bring in more revenue to pay off the bond rather than the general fund paying off the bond?
Yeah, that's all additional items that we'll be looking at. Absolutely. Yep. No, good points.
Anyone else? Mr. Haas?
So, Mr. Chair, I asked if we just refund, if we called the bonds and we had them refunded, essentially column 10, and I'm going back to page 10, right there. Essentially, that's what we're saving there, correct? Every
Column
year?
10,
the,
right.
The estimated savings would be, you know, in 2019 would be about $300,000 and about $200,000 going forward. So it's not like we've seen in the past, but it would realize real savings.
Oh yeah, sure.
And help our bottom line.
It's still extremely efficient. I mean, a general rule of thumb is, you know, if you refinance $10 million of debt, I'm just using round numbers. If you refinance $10 million, that a lot of entities will go forward if you're saving, say, 2% or 3% of the amount you're refunding. So 2% or 3% on $10 million is $200,000 or $300,000. You see here, we're quite a bit, you know, we're 4 or 5 times that amount. So again, from an efficiency standpoint, it's very good. From a total absolute dollar amount, it's not nearly like we experienced in 2017, but it's still, you know, it's still pretty good. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And the good part about this is this would be the last of your debt that hasn't been touched, that is touchable. You're going to have those 2003 Cs out there, but they're non-callable. So you can't refinance them for savings. So this would be the last.
Absolutely.
Last pass.
Okay. Thank you again.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Myers? You want to introduce yourself again and,
Yes, sir.
and Mr. Stahl?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Brent Miles with North Point Development. It's your yearly update and a new project coming before you tonight. I'm Brent Miles. I'm one of the owners and founders of North Point Development. We're based in Kansas City. Most of you know our track record here in northeast Pennsylvania, particularly in Luzerne County. Seems like years ago, it was just 2 years ago, that we purchased the Hanover Ridge Park. As you all know, the Earth Conservancy originally had it. It was sold to Trammell Crow. Trammell Crow got it entitled and sold it to KTR to Prologis. So long story short, a lot of people getting it entitled, saying they're going to do something. We did it. And the first tenant we had there was Chewy.com. And then we built buildings 2 and 3. So what I had originally projected on Hanover Ridge was a 3-year build out for that park. As you've driven by, all 3 buildings are now officially complete. I think we have the certificate of occupancy on all 3, not just the one that I had made commitment here in the council chambers. We have 3 great tenants in that park, and we're now up to our projections when everybody gets stabilized and moved in. We're about 2,000, maybe a little bit over 2,000 jobs in that park. We do this around the country. You all have heard this. We're the 2nd largest private landlord in the country now. That's due in part to projects like this. I have never seen a park like Hanover Ridge. I do this from Sacramento to Dallas to here, and I have never seen 3 quality tenants move that fast with that many jobs and that much capital investment. It is a phenomenon. So that went faster than I expected. As many of you know, I went through the process of LRTA on what's generally known as the Hanover 9 piece. 2/3 of that is in Hanover Township, 1/3 is in Nanticoke City. I said I would build a building a year starting this year. I thought I would build a 1 million square foot building as the first building. In reference, Chewy is 800, so it's even bigger than Chewy. My gut, I'm finalizing my plan now, but my gut is I'm going to build between a 1.2 and 1.4 million square foot building, so larger than expected. That would be the largest in northeast Pennsylvania, probably, if I do the larger one, by 400,000 feet. So it's a large building. Building 2, which is in Nanticoke, I was supposed to start in 2020. I have a tenant for that building, and I'm going to be starting construction. I met with the mayor today in Nanticoke and the city administrator and gave them the good news that I would be starting here on that building in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So building 1 and 2 are probably going to be about 2 million square feet, the same size as Hanover Ridge, and those are going to happen both this year. So I'm ahead of schedule which again, I'm pretty simple to figure out. I then went and said, I need more runway. I want to keep going. I want to keep investing. And therefore, I went and put the Chamber of Commerce piece under contract and what's known as the Earth Conservancy Loomis piece. Now, both of these pieces, I've got you on a map. Generally, you know where these are, but I'll zoom in just a little bit more. This is obviously the new South Valley Parkway. This is as it crosses 29 and gets over by the Hanover 9 piece. So these are both obviously nonprofit owned. Earth Conservancy and the Chamber are nonprofit. My goal is to fit 3 buildings on that. This third building, I'm still working on engineering. It's a tough site. It's all over a tough site. There's a large UGI line and easement that runs through the middle of it. But you know, we have a lot of experience in this area and believe that we can deliver these buildings. These buildings would look exactly like Hanover Ridge, same quality construction, same, literally same color scheme, same paint, everything that you see. And what we like about it, I'll show you here in a minute, is that essentially we're building a park all along the new corridor. I know a lot of people, probably people in this room, people in this sitting up here at these tables, had a lot to do with South Valley Parkway. Now that South Valley Parkway is coming to life with what it's supposed to do, which is economic development. So again, we'll be coming through the LRTA process. If you read in the papers, I think there's a couple here, we went through the school district last week. We had a unanimous vote on LRTA. This is the same LRTA schedule that we had on Hanover 9, which is the 7 years at 100. Then it decreases 90, 80, 70. Again, unanimous vote at the school district. We go to the Hanover Township vote September 5th, I believe. Given our track record in Hanover, I think we'll have support that night. I think this is probably the most important graphic, one of the most important graphics, and I'd be happy, Sam at the Township, Mike at the Earth Conservancy, everybody that's seen this has asked if we can print one of these boards and leave it for them, which shows, I know your bond people were here. I actually met them in the parking lot of Chewy when they were doing your bond rating and said, this is a place to invest. Northwestern Mutual's investing in these buildings. And if Northwestern Mutual feels safe about the economy of Luzerne County as the conservative group that they are, I think that you should feel good about the future of Luzerne County. So what I like about this graphic is it shows Hanover Ridge, it shows the Chamber Loomis, and it shows Tradeport 164, which is what we call Hanover 9. But when all's said and done, we're almost 5.2 million square feet of new Class A industrial development. We project just shy of 4,000 jobs, and I think it's going to be more. The capital investment from us, just the Kansas City North Point development money, is $280 million. And that is, again, you go anywhere across the country, that is a big number. That doesn't mention the capital investment that's been made by Chewy, Adidas, Patagonia, and the future tenants. And I think that will rack up another 100 to 150 million by the time we're all said and done. So, and then obviously annual payroll, putting a lot of people to work here and having impacts throughout the community with people getting jobs, underemployment, the things that we've talked about in the past. I would just simply say, and I hope this comes out the right way, promises made and promises kept. You've been a good partner of ours. The school district's been a great partner of ours. The Hanover Township, Nanticoke City. Everybody has done what they said they were going to do, including us. We'll be back before you. I'm not sure the date. I think it has to be scheduled. But we'll be back before you in either the next meeting or the following meeting for the hearing. But we wanted to give you a preview of what you were going to see that night in the LRTA presentation. And again, we always say it, capital goes where capital is welcome. And I think we've been welcome in Luzerne County. And I think we've done a good job. And I hope you're proud of what we've done, because we're proud of what we've done here.
Questions? Mr. Miles. What kind of leases do you normally get with, with your tenants that come into those buildings?
Yeah, so in Hanover Ridge, we're averaging some of the longest leases. So we own about 50 million square feet across the country. I'd have to look, but we probably have 350 to 400 leases. Different company, I shouldn't say 350 to 400 leases. Some of those are repetitive clients, General Motors, for example. These have to average some of our longest tenures. I think we have a 12, a 15, and an 18 off memory at Hanover Ridge, which in our world, if you can get a 7 to a 10, it's a really good day for you. These companies are investing so much money here that it's almost the opposite. They want to be protected to say, after 7 or 10 years, I don't want to be kicked out because I have so much in your building. I think this is true. I think there's a tenant here that has more in the building than the building cost. If not, it's very close. So you can understand why they want to be protected. I have a little bit shorter lease with my Nanticoke building. It's just shy of 8 years, and that is because the company says, we're growing at such a fast clip, we'd like to do more, but we just can't project our future after 8 years. They're just on a huge growth trajectory. So that was important to them, and I said, we're going to keep building buildings here. We'll find a way to make sure that you stay in this county. I have a prospect I'm working on right now that would be a 21-year lease. So that is an unheard of lease in our world. So I think these are long-term capital investment. Let's stay here and let's make this our roots. And we know why, right? We've talked about it 10 times in these meetings. It's logistics and labor. The logistics and labor always score well for these companies. There are labor struggles in Pennsylvania, down in the Lehigh Valley and places like that, where there's multiple Amazons and the workforce is just getting sucked up and the wages are inflating. Here we're still scoring really strong on labor, and we think that will happen for a long time.
So obviously we have a good history of tenant leases there then.
Yeah, thank you. It's great companies.
Yeah, Mr. Miles, welcome back to Wilkes-Barre and you and your team. I appreciate you, and I see the pictures here, and every time I go up 81, I see there's that beautiful project that I did not support last time.
Well, I didn't want to say anything, but this time it's going to be different.
I hope it is. And that being said, I hope you can negotiate that Lerdebeck with Mr. Pedri's people and make it different. I really appreciate that.
Yes.
But I acknowledge the value that North Point has brought to our area. Again, my argument is the same as a year ago at this time. We have the logistics. We are the gateway to the Northeast and the heartland of Pennsylvania. I think the market bears that out, and we're seeing development all up and down the 81 corridor. I would just encourage your staff and our management to perhaps work out a little better LERTA deal for us. You just heard the presentation from our money managers here, PFM. We're not quite out of the woods yet. We made great strides in Luzerne County, but we talked a year ago, comes down to nickels and dimes. And if you could help us find some of those nickels and dimes in the cushions, that would be really helpful. That would help me come on board to support this. I do see the value. I see your company is making true on its promises. I'm not taking away from that. But I would just like to see the deal be a little more beneficial to our tax
and this isn't meant to be argumentative.
Yeah, I don't want to take that approach either.
We've just seen up and down the 81 corridor that you mentioned. Everybody has my paraphrasing, everybody has upped their LERTA game. So the typical LERTA, as we all know, used to be 190. At the split, they're 100 per 10. There's a KOZ site in Jessup that has a KOZ with a LERTA layered on it. I'm competing against that site. So again, I understand your perspective. I understand your position. It's just really difficult. When we don't have the most aggressive LERTA, we don't have the most aggressive LERTA. Miracle has 100% for 10 years in Lackawanna. We have this KOZ site I mentioned in Jessup. That adds up. It's 10, 15 cents. We know these sites are tough. The Earth Conservancy sites are super tough to grade. No utilities, no streets. So all of that adds up into how are we competitive? It's my age-old argument.
Thank you.
Mr. Irvin and Ms. Saban and Ms. Wickes.
I voted against all the Miracle LERTAs because I explained to Bobby Miracle at the time that the county was broke, and that the county couldn't afford to be giving away all of these LERTAs so he can get himself rich and wealthy. Okay. we just had our financial review, and, you know, there's going to be a $5 million increase in debt service payments that are going to be due in a year and a half from now. So the county is going to have to make a tough decision to raise taxes. So to raise taxes, but yet to give incentives away to a large company. LERTers, in my opinion, the township can structure LERTA any way they want. The school district can structure it any way they want. And we can bow out of it. It's not like a KLZ where all three have to agree to a LERTA.
That's right.
Because we did that in Hazleton before, I think with Archer Daniel Midland. We had a different structured LERTA than the township and the school district did, and they bought off on it. So
yeah, I understand your perspective.
Like Harry said, you know, you need to work with the county. You got to realize that we've got bills that we've got to pay, and that the taxing structures are different. The local municipality and the school district get wage taxes. We don't get wage taxes. The bulk of our taxes in this county come from property taxes. We're not allowed to assess a wage tax. Secondly, I think you bought these properties, whether you get that LERTA from us or not.
That's an incorrect statement.
Well, you didn't buy it yet? Well,
that's an incorrect statement.
Okay. You didn't buy it yet? Or you're not going to
I didn't buy it, no.
Okay.
I never buy it before the LERTA, and I wouldn't buy it with the LERTA because I'm not going to put myself in a disadvantage. And what always gets me is that you say you're giving it away. I'm actually giving you.
Giving me what?
I'm giving you tax dollars. You get nothing. You get zero off those parcels now. Zero. And I've read in the paper, you specifically, talk about non-profit owned land.
That's right.
And we got to get into productive use.
I do. Yeah, I want it in productive use, but I want some taxes from it, not 10 years from now.
You don't get taxes 10 years from now.
My bills will be paid off 10 years from now.
Yeah, so you get zero now. I start paying land tax the day I buy it. The faster I go, I've exceeded all my schedules that I've ever told you. I've been conservative and I've over-delivered.
I don't know if you over-delivered.
You don't think I've over-delivered?
No, I'd like to see the wage structure that those companies are paying and how these people are living that are working in these places. I'd like to see that. I don't have that. I don't have that data in front of me.
You want to see how much the people make?
Yeah,
is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
In real terms, not what you make up, but I like to see it from the company standpoint.
Okay. Great.
Ms. Seidman?
Because I know what some of them pay. I work for one of them.
Okay. And what do you think? Where do you think I haven't told you that?
I don't think you told me that last time. From what I saw on the internet, what people were saying they made, what you said.
Okay.
When you talk about the Hanover 9,
yes,
and we have such great tenants, and I know that you cannot disclose the tenants as of potential tenants as of this night, but are we going to be looking at some well-known, well-respected, nationally the same type of tenant that we have with Chewy, Patagonia, and Athletica?
Yeah, I am.
Are we starting to look at?
Just to be clear, I don't have my tenant yet for the big building for Hanover 9.
Okay.
But I am in the conversation with a very well-known company. Very well-known. I think it would bring a lot of publicity. And if we were to land that company, I think it would bring a lot of publicity nationally. It is that large of a project, that size of building and the capital investment and the jobs they would bring. I wouldn't be surprised if you would see that as literally a Wall Street Journal type headline. That's how big a project I'm chasing.
Well, that's great, because I think that the three that we have now has just done wonders for this area.
Great names and great companies, and very recognizable. And if you didn't know who Chewy was before they moved in, the flyers that I get every 3 days in my mailbox sure will let you know the.
Well, if you have a pet.
If you have a pet, you do know what Chewy is for sure.
Swakes?
Yes, well, you know, I totally understand, Steve, where you're coming from. But, you know, I can't argue with thousands more jobs. Luzerne County needs jobs. Would it be great if they were higher paying jobs? Absolutely, positively. But I believe we have the people to fill those jobs. I think we have willing workers. And So I say, great, let's go to it. Let's go for it. Now, also, but you said something interesting also, Steve, and I agree. Maybe it's time to think a little more creatively, and maybe there are other things that developers like North Point can do. As an example, we have many bridges in Luzerne County.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, would I love to see the name North Point on some of the bridges.
Yeah.
And some help from North Point to help support our infrastructure.
Right.
Because let's face it, I mean, you all rely on infrastructure, we all do.
Sure.
So, I mean, I just throw that out there as maybe a possibility, Mr. Manager, in North Point, to do some discussion.
Yeah, if I could just address that really briefly. North Point has been a good corporate citizen in county administration's eyes. They've provided support for Hanover Police Department, Hanover Area School District, the Air Show, in terms of financial support and some of the things that they've done there. In addition, I've had numerous discussions with North Point and their attorney regarding those are county roads in the Hanover Industrial Park. I kind of wish there were no county roads. That's a whole other story. But those are county roads, and we talked about bus stations, and we talked about structures, and we talked about sidewalks, and how do these people best get to work. And Brent knows that supporting those types of projects means help those tenants and those workers get there safely. And every time I've called on Brent or Mr. Stahl, every single time they've answered the call and helped us throughout the board. I would say this: every single time that I've sat down with North Point during my 2 years as county manager, they've delivered every single time that I've worked with them. Now, hopefully, obviously, these nine buildings that I'm looking at right here are beautiful, and I'd love to see that in Luzerne County. I'd love to see more than that in Luzerne County for northeastern Pennsylvania. So I'm asking, obviously, is this council's final decision for what you want to do with it? But I would say that, yeah, I would listen. I got 300 bridges. If you guys want one of them, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. Even more than one. If it doesn't have to be our biggest bridges. It could be some three small.
Listen, we can do the North Point pothole filling project too. I love that as well. But well,
Domino's is filling potholes now.
Whatever it takes.
So I guess I can't.
Whatever it takes. But listen, I would say, Ms. Wiggs, in answer to your call, they have been corporate citizens, and obviously we can work on some other things.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and again, we don't live here, but we try when the call comes. We need help on this, especially, I would say, especially the school district. I know that's a different entity than you, but the school district in particular, I just probably have a soft spot for them. When they needed computers, they have a school resource officer funding issue. They need a new security system. Those are all things that are significant to them, because I know of their not that everybody didn't have financial struggles, but they had a major, I would say a major struggle over the last year. And I'm fully cognizant of the tenant benefit from LRTA, but that doesn't mean that we can't be good, just good corporate citizens and humans. The school district needs something, we're going to try to help them. Okay. I will also say, several of you asked that I work hand in hand with the trades.
Yeah.
I think we've fulfilled that promise. I don't know if I'm going to get a huge letter of support out of the trades, but my goal is to have a positive comment from Warren. I think I've tried to step above and beyond with him and his group on from our last hearing. My goal was that if we did a project here, that Warren wouldn't be up at this podium in a negative fashion, and I hope that holds true at this next hearing. That's my personal goal with him.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Sneak. Go ahead.
At this time. Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think North Point has more than proven their worth in this area. Between the jobs they brought in, the money for Hanover Township, the money that's spent in those areas, the buildings alone, as Mr. Miles touched on coming down the interstate, are absolutely beautiful. So at this time, instead of questioning Mr. Miles. I want to thank Mr. Miles for him and his principals that invested money into this area. And thank you again. And I'll support anything North Point does.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Hope your airplane ride is safe.
Well, I'm driving to Baltimore to go to Denver,
okay.
so it's going to be a long 24 hours here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all. We'll see you here in the next few weeks, okay?
Okay. Mr. Sweats?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet is the mid-year report. I'm going to have it on the screen. Oops, I'm going to run my way on it. There we go. This report is a detailed report of the 2018 as of June 30th. I'm going to go through not every slide. I'm going to go through some of the high-level slides. I'll go through our comments at the bottom, our positive and negative comments for mid-year. I also have a couple notes here, things that I think will be asked. Anything else that's asked that I have, I will gladly provide tonight. If not, I'll get back to council. So in front of you and in your packet is the 2018 mid-year report. As you can see on page 2, which is the year-to-date slide, you can see that the revenue totals were 110 this year versus 110, 350, almost the exact same amount of revenue. On the expense side, you could see 52.8 versus 56.2. You do realize that in our, not in our spending totals, but in the budget totals is our reserve number. So there is the reserve number in our, if you look at the totals, right underneath there, Fund 100 totals, 110.3 million, 110.3, 80%, and 42%. So these are very similar to where we were at this time last year. The last column is prior year to date. To reiterate what I said at the last meeting, the year-to-date transactions includes the year-to-date encumbrances. So some of those may be over 50%. The encumbrances are included in there. And also some of our bills, such as New World and Kronos, and some of our corrections are front-loaded where we pay the whole year. So I'm going to go through revenue. Again, I will not go through every slide. This is an important slide because it's primarily our taxes, and as everybody said in this meeting and prior meetings, our taxes are the lifeblood of our revenue. If you look at the top line, the current real estate taxes, we've almost made up. If you remember a few months ago, we were well behind on taxes, and even as of June 30th, we're almost right where we were on the prior year on that top line real estate current levy. It was as recent as probably two and a half months ago that was $6 million down. And I said we will get that. It was a timing issue, and you could see it in the report that versus last year, we're in a very similar position. Same thing for the real estate prior year. Again, I'm not going to touch on every number. You can see it's slightly above. So that's 4.3 million versus, if you're around last year, 4.2. So slightly more in real estate taxes. Really not much in the other income. We moved some things in other income. We first receipted the money that we received from CCAP and other income, and then council had us move it to reserve, so that was moved to the reserve fund. So that was in there. This, I believe, was the third year for that. It was about $267,000. The first year was about $100,000. So we had gotten some money from CCAP that we did not have in previous years. Permits there's quite a lot of permits for primarily the sheriff's department. So even on the report, they're all jumbled together. But I just wanted, it's all listed there, all the different types of permits that the county has. Really, the biggest one in there is basically the fees permit towards the bottom at 415.15, and you'll see that we're about 60,000 less, but in a pretty good spot compared to last year. On page 11, this is where we were just talking before about rent of property and rent of buildings. So you'll see that's in our 430.15. We're talking about renegotiating some leases. You can see currently we're pretty much right where we were last year at $379,000 on line 430.15. Like I said, down the bottom we have a couple highlighted points that I'll read off. Unfortunately, when we do the PDF, it does show a lot of the zero balances. It's just the way the report is populated. Our special expense reimbursement, so I'm on slide 15. Special expense reimbursement, we're at 1.3 million. We're at a little over $1 million. If you remember, the courts came to us with a one-time about $500,000 from domestic. That is in that line. So that's what that difference is. So I'm going to go on to the expenses. Most of you already know primarily the salary and the benefits is a good portion of the expenses for not only the general fund but all the funds. So you can see the classifications for non-rep, rep. You won't see anything in merit, not because merit wasn't out. The decision was made to put merit at a division level during the budget hearings, and then obviously if it was granted, it's in the salary line item. So that's why you'll see a number in the budget number but not in the actual. But you could see the year-to-date current and the prior year-to-date on the first slide there on the expense side. One of the lines we talk about a lot in the budget hearings is the prisoner care health. So I'm on slide 23. It's line 56035. You can see that we're pretty much right where we were last year at $1 million on a $2.3 million line item.
I'm sorry, we don't have the same page numbers that you have. So
sure, I'm sorry.
Just back in Fund 100 General Fund, 530.45 benefits retirement.
Sure.
Is that the ARC? It's $9 million?
$9 million is the general fund for the ARC. The county had paid $4.6 million. Let me grab this sheet here.
It's not in here.
I'll give it to you. The county paid $4.6 million in May, and we actually scheduled a payment for $2 million for tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, we'll have paid $7 million of the 9.3. The 9.3 is the general fund contribution.
Okay, but that's not in here.
Which you're on the, what's the line? 530.
Well, it's 530.45.
Yep, I'm on slide 19. Yes, that payment was made. I'm not sure where that got recorded, but we did pay at the time of this report half of that payment. So we have 4.4 million. I'm assuming it's on the balance sheet and we'll need to reclass that to there, but it was made to the vendor. They have our money, and this number should have been half of that. The 9.4 is correct, and at the time of this report, we paid about 4.4 million.
So you paid 4.4 in May?
Yes.
And then?
It's about 2.3 or 2.4 that we scheduled for tomorrow. It was scheduled after 5 today, so we'll hit tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
So it wouldn't have been for this report. It would have been, it's going to actually hit the bank on 8/15.
Well, that wouldn't have been for this report, but the first one should.
The first one should absolutely be on here. So I will find out where it was paid and why it's not in that line.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Are the agencies paying too, on time?
The agencies are paying. Some of the agencies are paying quarterly. Some are paying twice, twice a year. We're trying to get them off yearly because in the past they've paid yearly. They are paying the full amount. Did every agency pay up until June, as of June 30th? No. But when we put together our 9.3 general fund non-agency contribution, that assumes that they make all their payments, and we go back to them and say, hey, it's already June, you haven't made your payment, are you going to make it in July? So at this time, every agency probably was not at the 6/30 date, but we've contacted them, and the 9.3 is everything that's not an agency payment. You could see on the debt service section, so it starts in the accounts with the 570. Obviously, we have our presentation on debt service. You can see the debt service, what it was last year, some of the refinancing savings, and as was mentioned in the meeting, not going forward, even if no projects are done, what will need to be done in debt service. But the debt service payments are here. I think one of the questions rating agencies always ask are we making our debt service payments? That was brought up in the end of 2015. And I think Mr. Urban said we never miss a debt service payment. I know you've said that before, and we haven't. But I know that was brought up during some of the ratings hearings. So you could see on the page that starts with 57041 all the individual debt service payments.
Could you just go back to 560.73?
Sure.
So there's a line item there for a levy fee. I mean, it's zero, but why do we have a line item for a levy fee expense?
560 point levy fee.
560.73.
If there's any activity in the last 5 years, and I'm thinking at that point we probably did, we do need to clean this up. I said there's a lot of zeros number. We haven't had a levy fee in some time. We can't delete anything or make it inactive because if we need to go back and pick a 2013 report, it will not pick up that number. But I believe levy fee was more than 5 years, and this is one of the things we can clean up going forward. If something's more than 5 years old, we can make it inactive so it doesn't show up in your
The levy fee was
report.
never collected by the county, and so I don't know why we have expenses that are associated with it.
I'd have to find out even what the name levy fee meant. I'm assuming, again, the levy fee was collected by the authority, not the county.
Right.
So let me go back and see what that was for. So 560.73.
Maybe the county should be paying a levy fee, though. Help lower the cost of everybody else's levy fee.
For 6 years, we've had people come and say, could we get rid of the levy fee? And we have to keep saying, we don't do the levy fee. And here it is in the...
You could see on the debt, the very bottom of the debt, probably 3 or 4 pages from the levy fee, the budgeted debt service. And as we talked, the budgeted debt service for this year is slightly under 21 million. We're at we'll round it to 20.8 million, and we're talking about going to 25 million, even with no projects. As the manager had alluded to before, we always do the debt update, but some of it was so we had some numbers or estimated numbers for the budget hearings. And if you remember in the past, we'll have numbers, and as we get new information, we can change numbers. But just so we have something, an estimate of what to put in the budget for the debt service. You'll see on the page underneath the debt service, because Ms. Houck's right, my page numbers are different because I'm looking at the slideshow, not the packet. So if you're on the transfer line, which is underneath the debt service, the two institution lines, which used to be 2 LCC, so that's now in 2 institutions.
What line is that?
It's 590.26. So that line is not just LCC, but it's primarily LCC. So one of the things is when we get to the end of the year and we're making cash flow, there's times we'll make a payment for multiple months for LCC. We said it before during the budget here, and to pay LCC a good chunk of money at one time. Also, you'll see transfers in there, 590.34. That's the county's transfers to the other human service agencies, to CMY, to MHDS. And you can see we're at 54%, so we've actually put in a little more than half.
Can I just ask why we don't account for the LCC money in its own line anymore?
We could. The line's still there. We can do that during the budget, just move it, and we can actually do a reclass now because we have the line. We can put LCC just in the 590.28 line. It may make it cleaner and put less in 2 institutions. The line does already exist. I don't have a problem with that. You can see on the next page the reserve fund. At the time here was the 4.8 million because the money that came in from CCAF was moved after that. It was a July council meeting. So right now it's close to 5 million. I think the manager before said 6 million. It's a little bit over 5.
Got some TIF money in too.
And then there was 100 and the 1.1 million for the TIF. So it is correct. So we moved 2 things. Yes.
There's a refunds line at 590.14. Are those the refunds of taxes from assessment?
Yeah, so 590.14, that is the, On this report, obviously, it's all the general fund, but that just sits in the I believe it's in the assessor's office. That's the one we sit down every year about the prior refunds, not the current year refunds. Because if somebody starts a claim this year and it's settled this year, it gets netted against this year's revenue. This is any company or private individual that challenges their assessment that we pay for a prior year. Yes. And that was $750,000 2 years ago, I believe. Harry had asked and others had asked, to cut it, and we brought it down some. You could see we're at pretty much 50% of the current number. So we're pretty much at a number we could live with. I think your question was, can we put it lower? And I understand we're trying to balance keeping the expenses as low as possible but having money to pay the bills. So as of June, we were at 50%. I think 550 is a pretty good number. We'll see as we get some more data as we go towards the budget hearings. I'm just going to go to the notes down here. So on our slide, so it's 2 slides from the end of the presentation, and a lot of these are on the expense side are repetitive from prior years. We went through and tried to pick the high-level items. So obviously the CCAP unemployment dividend check we received was more than budgeted. We hadn't budgeted that. ARD application fees are higher than they're over the year-to-date budget. So we're collecting more fees. Anytime we collect any fees, regardless of which type, helps the general fund budget operationally. And then on the expenditure side, and even some of the revenue, we just put items and notes kind of positive and the negative. The expense reimbursement, and that includes a couple things. That includes our reimbursement for security, which we did send out and got from the agencies from January until June 30th, probably the end of July. So at the time this report was run, we didn't have it, but we've gotten that money since this report was run. We have the cost allocation plans, a good portion of this money that sits underneath my budget. We've billed for that. We've gotten some, not all. So, and this is primarily the expense reimbursements is a line that we always look at. When you get towards the end of the year, it's more of a timing issue, but we're trying to bring them up for twofold purposes. Number one, to have a true number. And number two, as we're looking at this report and getting ready for the mid-year and the budget preparation, that we have the numbers correct. So we've sat down with the departments and said, here are your bills, what's your cash to pay us back to get this number up from 18% to a more manageable number. But this is something, grants and expense reimbursement, that we've talked about in every mid-year since I've been here. Same thing with corrections. It's not as bad as some of the years, but corrections, and that's all of corrections because this is a Fund 100 report. So it's not the main versus the MOU. Of all of corrections over time is at 58% of the budget amount. I do believe last year one of the lines we moved from 1.1 million to 1 million in the 3 different budgets for correctional services. And then the CAPIAS related expenses, we can't control where we have to pick up CAPIAS. So they're at 100%. They would need to do a budget transfer going forward. It's a $20,000 line item. It's not a $2 million line item. But just to give some items a note, they've already used their budget in June, and we'll have to do any kind of transfers going forward. So that's the, not the 80,000 foot level. That's 30 pages, so maybe the 20,000 foot level. Anything that I didn't look at or get asked before, I can take some questions now. If I have the answer, I'll gladly give it to you. If not, I'll write it down with these other questions.
Just a basic one. Your tax collections are about where they were at last year. Is there any municipality that is below the average? You don't need it now.
Yeah.
You can look at it. Just
okay.
Send me something on
Sure.
that. That's all. Thank you.
Yep.
Schwartz, I'm going back to the expenses.
Yep.
Back on page 49 in our packets. It's number 550.40 gas. I thought that this council amended that budget for gas usage, but I see it here at the adopted is the same as the amended.
I think
was I off in that? Is that in a different line item?
I think at one point it was in a different line and we kind of combined it, and it was talked about at the hearing, and I think the number itself was lowered, but I don't think we actually did an amendment. So I think during the budget hearings we cut some pieces of it. I don't remember us actually amending it, but I can look back and see if that was the case.
Yeah, I think it was done during the hearings as well. All right, okay. I thought that'd be reflected in this, but thank you.
Sure.
Swett, you want to talk about the budget update?
Sure. The audit update?
Audit, excuse me.
I could give a budget update too. We were actually working on the budget, but I figured, sure.
Shortly, you'll be doing that quite often. So.
I'll go to the podium. I'm not sure this is on. I speak loud enough, but I'll move. So the audit update, I sent something to council as of the time you get information in this packet. Since I've been working with the two auditors at Mayor Dussel to get something, as of 4:30, 5 o'clock today, they're working on drafting the audit. So they are not doing any field work, they're drafting the audit. But as you draft the audit, as we've seen before, there are questions that come up. There was 3 specific questions which I asked to be CC'd on so I know where I'm at going forward to update council and just so the administration knows where we're at. Children and youth staff answered the questions. There was a request for a 2017 document that was also provided. So as of, like I said, 4:30 today, everything that was asked was provided. And I think I agree with the fact that it's 38 days late. I know the charter requirement. We actually had 2 on-time audits. Administration knows what's expected and work toward that. So I don't want anyone to think nothing was done, and I'm not saying that was implied. I just want the public and the newspaper to say there was work being done. Just because we weren't done doesn't mean no work was being done on children and youth. There was outside consultants, there was overtime, there was children and youth staff, there was my time down there. There was a lot of time being put in on children and youth, and now they're actually drafting the audit report. Historically, the drafts from some of the other auditors on the county side and the agencies, including CNY and retirement, you're looking at anywhere of 5 to 10 business days. So if they get the information, we've given everything, we can have a draft by, I'd say next Friday would be late, that we could possibly have something by early next week. Again, I can go down and have more emails tonight and or tomorrow. But before I came up for this meeting and the last conversation I had with the auditors, which was around 4:30, they had everything they needed. Once that's done, myself and Clifton Larson Allen can work on clearing up audit items related to, we said we were going to do the management discussion analysis once. If there's a journal entry needed, we'll do the journal entry for the report for children and youth. And I think we'll have a truer time of when the full county audit will be done. But right now there has been work done in CNY. While I don't have a firm date, they are working on the draft. And I think historically, like you said, next Friday I think would even be late. I think you'll have it before then. I don't think you'll have it in the next day, but that's where children and youth stands. Once that's done, the county will draft the management discussion analysis, work with the auditors on the financial statements, and also we'll have to update some legal letters. A lot of the requirements of the issue date are 2 weeks prior. So while we could have got legal letters after June, and we have, some of these things will be pretty much 2 weeks before Clifton Larson Allen plans to issue. So that's where we are until we get a draft, or until I get an update saying we won't, and here's why. That's what I have. Once we get a draft with an opinion and numbers that if the county needs to make journal entries, we'll do that. And we'll also work with CLA, Mr. Johns and Mr. Lee and their team, depending on the opinion and the numbers, to see what additional work needs to be done. And go from there. So I wouldn't mind giving an update, even if it's a verbal update from now until it's complete every voting meeting. I mean, every council meeting. And I think we're finally moving towards getting a CNY audit.
Questions for Mr. Swett?
Could you explain what the problem was at CNY?
Sure. I don't think it was one problem, though. I think it was, and again, I'm not a CNY employee, and you know that, but just for the public, I think there was, the auditors were there the 4th year, so in turn it should have been the easiest audit, not the hardest. This was their 4th year there. They asked for, I would assume that just like any audit, probably 80% is the same information. There's some information they ask for randomly each year. the information that was asked for was provided, but you need to, if you give a number, you need to give the support for it. So if I tell you I made an ARC payment, I have to be able to show that I made the ARC payment. And again, you know, I've got to look at what line item that was in. So just using that as an example. So you need to be able to back up your numbers for them to complete the audit. If you have conflicting numbers or you don't have backup for the numbers, then there's obviously an issue. In most of the updates, you'll see that it talked about the Title 4E revenue. I don't know the 4E program. I know it at a high level, that probably the 80,000 foot level. I don't know all the state requirements for it. I know the auditors were asking for documentation and it was either lacking or inconsistent. The auditors are the ones who have, you know, our auditors and their auditors have the right to ask for anything they want. We went through a similar thing, not as long and not on one item, the first or second year with Baker Tilly. So we thought we were done, and then we get, so as any professional firm puts things together, they can ask any additional information they need. So I think that's, you know, at a high level, that's it. There's a lot of turnover in children and youth at the caseworker level and on the fiscal staff. I don't think that helps, but you need to have people that can actually provide the work. So there's a couple things. So it's not just one item. And I just didn't want the public or anyone in council that nothing was being done. And because we got the 2 on-time audits and because it's under budget and finance, even though we don't do all the work, there is other departments. Same thing with retirement audit. When somebody asks about the retirement audit, it all rolls through and ends up under budget and finance. So we have done work on it. We've brought consultants in. So it wasn't like, hey, this, we don't need additional help. We identified the need for additional help and additional people were brought in. So I think from the county administration and the CMY side, everything was done to get everything done timely. But ultimately, you need to provide a product and be able to back it up, and the auditors have whatever requirements they have, and they all have their professional requirements. I did auditing before, so I will not take a shot at their auditors or any auditors. They have their own standards. So I don't think it was one thing, even though you saw primarily the 4E and the updates. I think it was a couple items. And I would say as soon as they're done, not just for the budget process, that we should be preparing to get these items ready, since we're already probably going to be behind the 8 ball for next year. We don't want to say, hey, we didn't make it. So if extra people were needed, and these are the right people, these people should be contacted. Also, I will say there was some 2018 work being done. So when somebody was there, they weren't just doing 2017. Well, that was a priority. If you remember from all the hearings back until 2012, since I've been here, and probably before then, the quarterly reports weren't filed timely in children and youth from many fiscal directors, Auditor 3, or whatever the fiscal title is over there. So that's not new. So when people have been coming in, they've been working on filing, getting reports for 2018, and working on the 2017 problem. So this really was not just one issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Number 4, I've asked Mr. Pedri to take any questions. You've had the information. Because of the length of the work session, we're going to move on to number 5. Any questions, Mr. Pedri would be happy to take.
I'm sure everybody's very upset by that. Try to be strong.
Ms. Crocomo? Northeast Revenue?
Mark, you want to handle that?
Mark?
Oh, certainly. Before you, the resolution for the repository sales. We've been through this many times before. There was one update that they did, Northeast Revenue did send through to us for the spreadsheet, removing one property. But the list now in front of you is the proper list. There also is a letter from Northeast Revenue stating that the bidders do not owe delinquent taxes. That's always one of our requirements. And besides that, like I said, we've been through this many times before. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
Questions for Ms. Makowski?
No, but if I may say, I'm happy to see some municipalities, 1 or 2, and a fire department making a bid to acquire some of these properties. That's great.
Questions? Okay, Mr. Kowski.
Well, I was expecting to be on the sidelines for this, but I guess I'll get the front row. First thing, forgive me for a minute because I get to talk for a moment, but I'd like to address the issue that was brought up about the leases in general so you understand how we operate with leases. But the first thing you should realize is that as the court system, we don't get involved in the numbers. It's in the province of the council to decide what will be the appropriate lease number and to enter into the lease. We are basically the advisor to be able to say that the leased property meets the needs and requirements that we have. Right? And there are extensive regulations and suggestions as to what would be appropriate to have for a leased property. And from my perspective, what we look at is, first of all, the property has to be customer friendly. Secondly, it has to be modern. And thirdly, it has to be safe. In general terms, that's what it is. Now, a member of the audience brought up numbers. And I'll have to tell you, I love numbers. I use numbers all the time in everything that I do. But I also, numbers can distort. And this idea that you can have a uniform cost per square footage distorts numbers. It violates the 3 laws of real estate valuation. And that is location, location, location. You're not going to be paying the same amount of money for a rental property in downtown Susquehanna as you would pay in a rental property in downtown Wilkes-Barre. So it's very important to look beyond the cost per square footage as well, to look into other things. Quickly, for the history, since I've been involved as a court administrator, it was a priority for us to look at leases. I'll point out that the great effort that was made to modernize our leases for the Wilkes-Barre location, and we're paying $7,000 for 2 premier leasehold facilities, which is now less than the cost of the one that we had previously in Wilkes-Barre. So we've made an effort for that. We've also recognized, and I believe in this firmly as a principle, that we should look first to using a county property wherever we can. You note that the Swearsville property moved to a county property, 0 rent. If we don't have a county property, we prefer to use a municipal building because in a way it gives back to the county, to the cities, but also it helps us, but we have the security of a police department right there. And we actually lessen the cost for the municipalities to go to the municipality, the police departments to go and so forth. That being said, it's a huge burden when we have 16 leases. And I'll point out the Kingston lease, for example, has been on automatic renewal for quite some time. So I would increase, they're going to ask for a new long-term lease with an increase in it. Okay? Now, turning to Pittston, all right, one of the things you have to look at is not the square footage. That's part of it, but you got to look at all the other things. And I love the terms of the Pittston lease that were negotiated by the office department. It's what is called a triple net lease. We pay that amount of money per month, and we pay nothing for air conditioning, nothing for heat, nothing for water, nothing for electricity, nothing for garbage removal, nothing for sidewalks, nothing for parking. All of that is the burden of the city of Pittston. And that gives us cost certainty, and it gives us relief of what we would have to pay. If you look at the cost of where commercial properties would go, if you work out this one way to look at it is it's $18 per square foot per year. You cannot get a commercial property in Wilkes-Barre or the environs for under $35 to $40 a square foot. So that alone is an economic saving for us, how to look at it. The other thing is to point out is that we have in the past advertised requests for proposals everywhere, and it's very difficult to get people even to respond to our requests for MDJ offices. And part of that is because of our clientele. That people don't like our clientele to be in a mix with a restaurant next door or a shopping center or a neighborhood. The other part about it is it's the nature of MDJ offices where they're open at night sometimes. If there's a murder in the morning, somebody's got to be arraigned, it's going to be 4 o'clock in the morning at the office. Turning to the the Pittston City, we've been working with them for many, many months on this. And and they wanted to have an increase because we've been on automatic renewal with them for a long time right now. So what we did in conjunction with the Office of Law is say, fine, we're willing to work with you on a longer-term lease proposed to council, but you know, the old, what lawyers always like to do, what is in it for us? Well, what they did for us is they renovated, they put a hallway in, they carpeted, painted the entire place, remodeled the courtroom, they put in a door for us, a payment door with security, and they've done over and above everything they can to modernize and improve that facility for us. As was pointed out to me, I tried to find out, no one knows when the first MDJ office moved in that Pittston Municipal Building. It's been there forever. And they believe it's the fabric of their community, and they want it to be there forever. So we're here today to talk about that lease, answer any questions about that, or really leasing in general, as to whether or not, as a court system, we believe that that is an appropriate facility. Part of the things that I have to look at, my requirements for AOPC that I work with, it meets all of our requirements. It's ADA accessible. It has security. It has the buzzers. It has cameras. Everything that we would want to have the three areas that I thought said at the beginning is there. But the most important thing to me is this is part of the fabric of Pittston City forever. They'd want to keep their office in their municipal building, and we're certainly willing to do that. Now, as to the price, I turn that over to Ramilda, whose office negotiated, but I do know that there's been a tremendous back and forth between that office and the City of Pittston officials on the price. What I would say what I like about it is it gives us cost certainty for 6 years. And to me, that's important. And I understand Pittston is looking at it. We've spent all this money to renovate, to improve the facility. We need to have a longer-term commitment. So as it stands right now, it's a 2-year commitment and then 2 automatic renewals if we choose to renew. The same thing is going on right now in Kingston. They're renovating because, again, if they're looking for a cost increase in lease, well, we have to have upgrades. We haven't had over there in well over a decade. So that is what we're working on for leases. So today I'm basically here to tell you this is the proposed lease that's been developed and negotiated. This is from my perspective, and as far as the money, it's recommended by the Office of Law that it's an appropriate amount of money, but ultimately it's your call as to whether or not it's an appropriate cost for the money and so forth. I'd answer anything else that you may wish to ask me at this time.
Okay. Questions?
Mike, does Kingston is it ADA?
Kingston is an issue with ADA, and it's not what you think. What the law requires is that we be able to accommodate people with disabilities. And Kingston does not have an elevator, the second floor.
And it has, the steps are incredibly...
You know, and so what we have been working with Kingston is to provide a satellite office on the first floor, you know, to be able to accommodate people walking in off the street. The bigger problem that we have with Kingston, we're working on with them, if you ever be up on their second floor, is they need a fire escape for the whole building. So like I said, we've been working with them because, frankly, I have certain requirements that they have to meet for me to be able to say it's a customer-friendly, safe, appropriate facility for everyone, and that's why the discussions have been gone for quite some time. You know, the problem also that we have is where do we go if you have to relocate? I looked at some county properties in Kingston area. We simply don't have any. And I'm certainly not going to come to this body here and say, let's buy buildings for MDJ offices. We certainly don't want to do that either. But you see how the problem is. It's not one size fitting all in just finding buildings. The other one we're looking at now is in Conyngham Valley in O'Donnell's area, where his office is right now. No one wants to rent to us. And there's just very few commercial properties down there to begin with where appropriate buildings to get. I'd love to find a better place to have a more modern location and so forth. It's a problem. But I also want to say, not to pat us on the back in court administration or the judges, we recognize leases have been an issue, and we've been working for years as they expire to look for other locations to reduce the cost, to make it better for everybody. And that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Just one comment. Yeah, just one. I'd just like you to go back to the AOPC and work with them to try to get an increase in the money that comes in here.
Right. And I would hope that the council would do that. And I'll point out that what happened to AOPC this year is that the state legislature reduced AOPC's allotment by $15 million statewide. And we'll see that in our budget discussions in a few weeks, because where I expect it's going to hit us, as you point out, Mr. Urban, all the time, the amount we're going to get reimbursed just for what it costs us for a judge's office every year is invariably going to go down. And no one will take responsibility as to how it disappeared, who sponsored it, where it went. But that happened again this year.
There'll be a group of them at the Woodlands on the 21st. You can go up there and talk to them. But we try to do what we can, and if you look at the overall budget for leases over the past years, it's pretty much stagnant. Where the increases are offset by savings when we move around, and there are some other county properties we're looking at down the road, but then again, that's a cost to the county to renovate and outfit. When you hear Pittston paid for it all, and Kingston's willing to pay for it all, so that's part of it that we factor into all this. But it's not a $180 million project like you had before, but it's a very important project. It costs a lot. So, thank you. Anything else I can add?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 7, PP&L agreement. Ms. Kokomo?
We were approached by PP&L, who they are doing some essential relocation for utilities at the Keystone Job Corps, and they need to run lines on properties that the county owns, and so the resolution before you is to grant PP&L an easement to do that.
Free. Free. It's for free.
Yes.
It's for free.
Yes, it's not a large area, but it's essential to relocate the utilities.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Number 8 is litigation. So
we discussed it. Attorney Jack Dean was discussed the litigation and the Al Flora matter in executive session.
Thank you. Mr. Haas, Act 13 grant process.
What you have before you, Council, is just what the committee came up with for the new process. If you're looking at the guidelines starting on page 108, many factors are the same. We spoke about just earlier about Wright Township. We extended the deadline, so we changed the scope and sequence of change orders a little bit in the new language. See here, I think that's page 11 when you look at the request guidelines. I'm just trying to give you some highlights of everything, just so that the council can be apprised of it. We took a look at issuing dollar-for-dollar match, so it would be a 50-50, and we had a little lengthy debate on that. Request shall not exceed $5,000. Obviously, it's contingent on how much funds come from the state with the fund. And we also talked about bullet point number 4, talking about achieving equity and make sure that multiple entities don't keep on receiving awards year after year. That some members had brought that forth as well. And administratively, you look at the 6th bullet point that, again, projects be completed within a timely manner. The scoring rubric on page 113. Made a minor change. We thought grant process should reflect more on collaboration, so the 3rd line item there, does the project involve collaboration? That was changed from a 5 to a 10, and down below, I believe project 4, and help me out, committee members, if I'm mistaken, but I think the goals and outcomes, what had been a 10 there, and now it's a 5.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Project number 4, is that right?
Correct.
And thank you. And you look on page 114 and 115. That's just the reporting that Ms. Lawrence updated for us and made all the dates relevant for this calendar year. The application is on beginning on page 116. committee thought that it should be limited to municipalities and nonprofits. We took the language of the higher educational institutions out just because they tend to get a lot of LSA grants as it is. We wanted to spread the funds out to folks that maybe couldn't really benefit from it, so we put that in there as well. And I don't think much has changed after that point, if I'm not mistaken. Jana, anything to add that maybe I missed? Any thoughts or
No, I
something
think
for the council?
you covered it.
Sharon,
Sure, you did
anything?
it.
Yeah.
I would just like to suggest that I think it looks great, the whole process looks great, but when you have a project success story at the end, when you have a final project, maybe we could publicize that on the website somehow, so that people could see where the Act 13 money is going and how it's benefiting the municipalities.
That's great, and it should be easier to do now, the new website too. Sharon,
So,
anything I missed? Anything
any
that-
questions between now and the next meeting? Mr. Haas, Ricketts, or Mr. Bowe, they're available, and they'll answer whatever, provide information.
I think it's been an honor and a privilege for all three of us in this
Okay.
place, like usual. Thank you.
We're down to number 10, capital plan. Next meeting, we will be voting on the capital plan. Do we want to have any amendments?
One question. that I have.
Yes.
Mr. Pedri, after I guess it was finally admitted that the Act 13 bridge money can be used for bridges, you put in some projects for Act 13. Are they included in the plan?
They're not in the capital plan.
Should they be?
No, because it comes from the Act 13 money.
Yeah, but it's a capital project.
This is the Act 13. Hold on a second. What are you talking about?
You said there's some Act 13 money that can be used for bridges. Is that correct?
Correct. There's the Act 13 bridge fund.
Right, but this is a capital plan, and those replacements are...
No, they're... Oh, we have them on here. Don't we have them on here, Ed? In the capital plan? All the bridges are listed in the amount of money that we have.
But there's none of them allocated to Act 13 money.
Right.
The
If you look at page 129 of 138, yellow, bright yellow is the key at the bottom for Act 13 money.
You want to know which bridges are being utilized for the Act 13 funding?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think Mr. Urban's question was, should they be part of the capital plan?
Sure, if you want.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all, because they're capital projects. I mean, they weren't included in the original plan, but then after you, I guess, learned that you had that money available, after Mr. Sweat said it was there.
Yeah, the 2-point-some million.
Yeah, you didn't believe me, but when he said it was there, then you believed him. So then you allocated some of it. But I think they should be put in the capital plan so the council can vote on and approve those projects.
I'm okay with that, yeah.
Okay.
We can get that in together for next time. I understand.
Mr. O'Neill, you provided some information on the sidewalks at the prison? You have a firm number on that?
While Mr. O'Neill is walking up, I asked our sheriff to do another review of the cameras. That number was very high. He's going to put together, he went back to the consultant and was able to reduce some of those numbers. We'll get those numbers to council as well prior to the vote.
So you'll, as soon as they
come in prior to the
proposal comes in, you'll get it out?
We'll get it out to council if you want to add the cameras into the project.
Mr. O'Neill?
Good evening, members of council. I did an assessment on the sidewalks personally, and we obtained actually four quotes based on a per square footage replacement value of those sidewalks. And just to give you some preliminary information, most of the blocks down there have been saw cut. They were probably laid in large sections and then cut afterwards. They're approximately 10 by 10, give or take a little bit. There are a couple of sections that are smaller. Some of you may have been down there to see them and had done an assessment of your own. What I did was a three-step process just to give you an idea of the funds that would be needed. As you're walking down the steps from the prison entrance, the sidewalks that I would say are the highest priority are at the bottom of the steps. They run about 30 feet to the right of the steps, and then there's a two-section set of sidewalks to the left that are okay, and then about another 15 to 20 feet. That was my priority one. So the estimated cost based on what we walked out, Mr. Mitchell and myself, for that portion of it is about $13,700. I then went to a second tier, which would include approximately 67 feet of sidewalk down near the entrance to the Sally Port, which is also in pretty rough shape. So to add that section would bring the total up to $20,450.
So those two phases together would be 20,000?
Correct. Yeah, I'm accumulating them. That's correct.
20,400?
20,450.
So $20,500?
Yes.
As a number?
And then just to give you a perspective, not that they necessarily need to be. Now, if you looked at most of those sidewalks, almost all of them have some damage. A lot of it's minimal where it meets the curb. So they can probably be patched. But just to give you an idea, to do the entire section from one end of the prison wall down beyond the Sally Port entrance would run $39,350.
If you would send that to us in an email?
I certainly can.
Please.
I have a summary here. Absolutely.
And then can use that for when we meet 2 weeks?
Yes. And just as a secondary note, the best price that we got on the replacement value was $10 a square foot. So based on a 10 by 10 slab, you're looking at approximately $1,000 per slab. Even though they're not necessarily laid that way, but that's what it would be on the way they're cut currently.
Thank you. Number 12, we talked about with Mr. Brzezina earlier. Number 13, the 911, Ms. Rosencrantz is here. I asked to put this on the work session. Obviously, we know that there's an end-of-life situation with the 911 technology that we currently have. I had read at one point in some of the articles or whatever, someone said the end of life was 2028. Mr. Rosencrantz provided that letter again that indicates December 31, 2020?
Yes, correct. That's the end of life for the equipment.
For the equipment?
Yes.
So that's pretty much our date that we have to focus on at this point?
Correct. Since 2011, we've been operating on this equipment, and it's over 20 years old, most of our radio equipment. The most recent radio equipment stopped manufacture that's currently in all of our tower sites throughout the county as of the end of 2011. So being that their end of life is 2020, the clock is ticking. We're already on life support pretty much with this current equipment. We're currently buying parts off of eBay for some of our voting equipment. So it's critical. I don't want to sound the alarm. As I said in January when I presented to council, the equipment will not shut off and stop at the end of 2020, but I would be remiss if I sugarcoated it and wasn't upfront with council from the beginning. We've been discussing this since 2016, July 2016, if I can refresh everyone's memory. I did present briefly in January of this past year with the full radio study and recommendation, upgrading to a fully digital VHF P25 trunk system for the county. From the beginning, our stance was to fully fund it as much as we can, including end user equipment for the municipalities and end users, since we have so many on the system. It wouldn't fund 100%, but to answer Mr. Urban's question from earlier, you're looking at $7 to $8 million just for end user equipment, because we have so many agencies and municipalities.
I guess my question is, what are the end users doing to come up with the money for that? And why are they relying on you to fund all of their radios and all of their cars?
Well, just for scalability and functionality of the system, it's recommended in our report and study and from the county that we fund as much end user equipment as we can, with the intent that the end users, the municipalities, the agencies, reimburse us or refund us if and when they're successful with grants. They have many more opportunities for grant funding than the county does. We have applied for several grant opportunities, one being the RACP grant through the governor's office for $5 million. That was a matching grant. So if we were successful in that, the county would have to match $5 million of that. We were unsuccessful last year. We've applied for ARC grant funding through the USDA, through NEPA Alliance for $150,000, and we've been hit with roadblocks with that. It's not an easy process. So we are trying our best to get any type of funding we can from the beginning. We're trying to manage the current system the best way we can, but also not throw good money to bad, investing too much in phase one of this project when we know that this equipment is end of life. We don't want to invest too much. And mostly everything that we're investing in this current system is going to be reused in phase two of the project if and when we get there. And just, if I may, just to reiterate and focus on our past a little bit. Originally the system, and there's a former director in the audience, I don't want to put him on the spot, but he was here back then and he could attest to it. The original system was designed by Motorola with 4 sites throughout our county. Now, I can tell you today, and Alan could have told you back then, it would have never happened. You would have never been able to do it. We are currently at 16 sites, in the future to be at 18. So it is my opinion that over the past 20 years since the radio system has been in place, it's paid for itself over that period of time. With the grant funding, with the loan funding, with the 911 funding, I know Mr. Urban brought that up as well, going to the past, over the original $10 million bond that was taken out in 1998 for the 911 facility to be built and to build out all the radio infrastructure, the 911 funding paid back at least $7 million from 1998 up until 2008, circa. With the 911 funding, radio typically is ineligible. End user equipment is ineligible. The way I see it, this system needs to be funded, but we have gotten grant funding, and as early as last year or 2 years ago, of about $1.5 million for a new phone system upgrade. So where we don't get money for a radio, we're certainly doing well in other areas. Act 12 of 2015 was passed. That injected $2 million more into the 911 funding for Luzerne County, which was less of an obligation for the county general fund. So since 2015, we've reduced the obligation by at least $2 million a year for the operation of 911. Today, as we stand, we have about a $7.5 million operating budget. The general fund is on the hook for about $1.2 million, and we cover about 6.3 in 911 funding, so you're about at an 80-20 split. So I think, in fairness to the past and being good stewards of our original bond funding and paying that back, I think we have a good track record, and I can't in good conscience not recommend moving forward with this project. There are certain things that we have options for. We are not only obligated to a bond refinance. We have been working diligently over the past year and a half with the USDA. They have a low interest loan program, which is about 3.875% right now until September 30th. That is a 5-year drawdown. So with this, if council decides not to do the bond option and go with the USDA loan option, we're pre-approved for over $21 million for the project currently. So if we were to apply and be successful and get that final balance, we would have 5 years to draw that entire amount. So in this case, if we only used $11 million to fund the infrastructure and build out the radio equipment, and the end users are successful with their grant funding, we wouldn't even have to touch the full $20 million if they were successful in getting a majority of that $7 million. So again, from the beginning, I said I didn't want to just bring problems to council. I want to work with council and get this built out as quickly as possible. If we were to start tomorrow, we're looking at 2 years to get the system in, get everybody programmed, get everybody used to it, trained, so the clock is ticking. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I know that was a lot.
I guess the other question I asked PFM was the fee right now that's on the 911 bill. What's the maximum that can go up to?
Well, right now it's capped at $1.65. That was passed under the Act. Okay. Originally, being on the funding subcommittee, we tried getting it passed at $2 or $2.50. that would have nearly paid for the entire 911 operation in all 67 counties in the state. Right now, we are in the process of looking at negotiating that fee and seeing what the best option is to try and either increase it, get the legislature to work with us, and see what the best option is. There's also other funding mechanisms in place that under the 15% grant funding program through the state, that's where we got our phone system funding through. But it's kind of a carrot and stick with the state right now. So unless you are sharing systems with other counties or other agencies, there really is no funding option as far as that grant funding goes. The only option we have with the radio to get any type of funding for the county is if we go all in with the state system. Now, they just contracted with Motorola, so you're stuck with a Motorola system if you go with that. The end user equipment, whatever is compatible, can be used on it. But they'll give us grant funding for our radio console replacement if we go all in with the state. There's a catch to that, though. We have many frequencies throughout our county. They're very valuable. The state would love to share those on their system. We have 16 tower sites currently. They would love to share that. So it would really build out their system. But again, that's just one option that we have to look at. I actually have a meeting with the state tomorrow in Harrisburg to look at that. But until we get an RFP on the street and really see what the numbers come in and what our options are, I think that'll give us a good baseline on how to tackle this and move forward.
Strauss. Good to see Mr. Rosencrantz. Thanks for coming out. But you're saying right now you're not leaning towards the state system because it seems like it might compromise.
There's many catches to that. There's many catches. One is we pretty much give up all our tower sites. Not give them up, but we have to share with the state. We would basically be sharing all of our frequencies with the state. And you know, there's a risk to that. And what if the state pulls out? I'm not saying that they have a great track record with this, but they have a Harris system in the past that miserably failed. It was not a good project, the 800 project. So I'm a little hesitant to go all in with the state at this time for basically a $700,000 to $800,000 grant. You know, would it be worth it? And that's something we would have to discuss. What would we be giving up for that? But that's where we're at.
And I know you're doing your due diligence. I know you're searching all the pots everywhere you possibly can. I was talking to Representative Bobeck today, and she sits on the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee. I know you're aware of that. Mm-hmm. And she said that on the Federal Register, there was just recent, like August 3rd, it came out that there's a grant opportunity. Are you familiar with that? Is that something that might pertain to our situation?
Yeah, a lot of those aren't radio. A lot of those are next generation 911 system. It's next generation. It's not so much digital radio. I think if we had any chance, it would be with the narrow banding requirement coming on 2026, 2028. But again, that's been pushed back. We've already gone through one narrow banding where it limits and reduces the spectrum for the radio use. So if we went to 6.25 with the mandated FCC narrow banding again, that would require us to do a digital upgrade anyway because the equipment cannot handle that. So either way, we'd only be kicking the can down the road if we put this off. You know, we could put a Band-Aid on it for 10 years. I don't recommend that because you're only going to have to invest significant money to upgrade in the near future anyway.
But there's nothing we can't phase in all the improvements. You say it's all or nothing. There's not we can't.
I don't want to say it's all or nothing. There's a combination of things working against us here. It's the digital phase movement. How many people have analog TVs today? If a TV is an analog and they're not relying on it, why would we rely on analog for public safety? You know, that's 20-year-old technology. It's worked great. Can it work great for 5 more years? Absolutely. But we would have to invest significant dollars into this current system to make it work and get it to where we need to be. Right now, it's not 100%. We still have complaints. I think probably every member of council has received a complaint. I got one 2 years ago on Easter morning that we dealt with in Nescopeck. So there are issues that we're trying to deal with every day, but we can only put so many Band-Aids on it.
And the last thing, we talked about that possible LSA grants are just a part of it. What was the issue with that about perhaps having a unified application? Was it that that can't apply to radio? Was that what?
No, I don't believe, I don't know if it has anything to do with that, restrictions, but the LSA grants are competitive, and that would require multiple municipalities putting in for the funding as a consortium, I believe.
If we could do that.
And basically, they would have to funnel that funding back through the county. So our consultant does have extensive experience, the Erie County project. He has agreements that have been drafted and worked on with them where they've applied for grants. Where they're successful, they give it back to the county. The county invests the money initially, gets the system up and running, and any grants or anything like that is given back to the county as a reimbursement for the costs that the county invests in the system.
And I know it's not going to solve the entire situation, but it really might get us a couple steps forward. But if we could do that, if management could dialogue with the municipalities, if we can, put some leadership out there. I know it's not going to cure everything.
I agree with you, and listen, we'll take anything we possibly can get. I can tell you what I went through for that $100,000 for this rotunda, and that was a battle. And don't forget, every municipality in Luzerne County has their own wish list that they're going to ask for LSA money. So we'd be asking the municipalities to forego this road or this project that's near and dear to them in order to do this. Now, if we say, hey, listen, we're not going to fund the radio project, this is all something we do together, this is all something we can talk about. I'm open for any suggestion, and I think it's a good opportunity to try to do something with LSA. I was hopeful with that RACP grant. That was a $5 million matching grant. We've put, Mr. Rosencrantz and his staff put hours, Ms. Sparrow from our office, days into this grant, and it was shot down by the governor's office. So be it, but these are competitive processes.
Do we apply that for again this year? Is that RACP grant available again, or was that a one-time?
That was a 2018 grant.
Yeah, that was a 2018.
So it would have to be again for 2019.
If it's renewable or not. Something we could look
We could be persistent. Typically, those RACP, I saw a lot go to colleges, universities, infrastructure type projects, not so much a public safety. Who wants to fund a public safety project, right? Yes, and they do. They benefit directly. Every municipality in the county benefits directly from this. Every citizen that visits our county, every person, is a direct benefit to this system. It's critical.
I know the issue is, if it is an acceptable use, any of these grants are out there, does it really appropriately fund what we're looking, can it fund what we're looking at doing? And then secondly, how do we go through the process? And
it's very frustrating for me as the director where I see, not that I want to not see these municipalities and local agencies getting grants, but when we have such an important project that benefits all of them, why can't we put in for the consortium and move forward and try and get that grant funding through the gambling money or whatever funding source it may be? But it is frustrating. It seems like every grant opportunity that we have, it closes in our face.
And listen,
we have to rely on the municipalities.
We're going to keep trying for us. We're going to keep trying. We're going to do everything we possibly can. $20 million is a huge amount of money. Some of these grants are $200,000, $300,000. Now listen, nickels and dimes, we'll take it. But we're talking about a large amount of money here at the end of the day. And council needs to make some tough decisions as to how we're going to go about funding it. First off, number one, if you want to fund it, if you want this project to go move forward. Number two is how you're going to fund it, whether it be through a grant or something along those lines, or bond, or a loan, or something. Or these are all the decisions that council has to make. We're putting this in front of you now because this is the tough decision you guys have to make over the next year.
And I think that's the crux of it, Mr. Manager. I think we've got to look at every option, and I think cobble together $1 million here, $1 million there. We might be able to hit $20 million. But I know I want to support you. Public safety is one of our priorities here, and let us know what we can do as a council. If we can lobby our Harrisburg officials, Sheila and I are on the legislative team. We're happy to do that.
Anything you could do, it would help.
We're successful in the Act 12 2015. I think the counties really went to bat for it.
If you give us at some point some kind of timeline that you think would be important to implement this new technology, and maybe identify some future steps that have to be looked at, decisions made, etc. So we have some idea what the timeline is and what steps have to be followed in order to process.
My plan at this point is to have an RFP on the street no later than October 1st. So that's
this year.
This year. So I
that's
don't know if that'll give you an
one
idea.
step on your timeline.
That's one that I can share right now. That's our main goal, is to get an RFP on the street, again, until we start getting to fund all or a portion of this, and whatever council wishes to do with the end user equipment. I highly suggest that we try and fund it as much as we can up front, and whatever we can't fund, then that'll be on the municipalities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing you back a few times, I'm sure.
Looking forward to being back.
Okay.
Thanks.
Public comment? Yes, sir. Hey?
Alan Pugh
Oh, okay.
in Dallas, Pennsylvania. I thought I heard the number earlier on your bond issue being down from 400 and some million to 211. I want to say congratulations.
291, actually.
Oh, thank you. It was hard to keep up with all of it, but it certainly shows great strides. And I know that your costs continue to go up in your projects and your ongoing events. So I think it, like many items, is worth saying, because I'm sure you hear it so often. That's a very nice job. Congratulations. On the radio.
Anyone else? Mr. Shiner.
I can appreciate what Mr. Shikoski had to say in response to my comments on the leases for the magistrate offices. But I think the good people of Shikshini, if we do rent space from them in their municipal building, think their property is just as valuable as Pittston. And that's where I think we need to have some kind of equal payments here when it comes to using the municipalities. And also, maybe we should look into taking some of the repository land that we have and building magistrate offices on it and putting them in county property so we don't have to be paying rent all over the place or in places where we can't easily find a property to lease. Tonight we're listening to all kinds of things. We're listening to North Point. I think North Point has been a good, valuable addition to Luzerne County. But you know, when I first started coming to county meetings quite a few years ago, when I heard about Alerta, the Alerta started out with 100%, 90, 80, 70, and so on through the 10-year period. Now we have creative Alertas. So we're going to give them 100% for 7 years, and then 90, 80, and 70% in the 10th year. Then you look over to Hanover Township. They've got the highest tax rate in the county at 29.65 mils. And North Point's doing nice things for the school district there, but they're also the highest rate in the county at 18.1747. We're all over the place here. Then we're talking about $20 million for new digital equipment for 911, which is very important. And then that mandated thing from the state of a paper trail voting machine of $4 million. Well, you know what I say to the state. What are you going to do November of 2019? Tell us, Luzerne County, you can't vote? I don't think so. You all have to start reining things in. You need to start thinking of better ways to make this county more efficient between the council and the management of this county. To borrow more money when we're finally getting down, I don't care if we are at 25% of the legal amount, we're still at the outrageous amount of almost $300 million still in debt from past borrowing. And to add more onto that, to get $24 million and have that bounce up to an actual $34 million by the time we pay all the extra costs on it, I don't think is quite fair to the people of this county. As a property owner and taxpayer, I say enough is enough. It's up to this council and this management to rein things in. You cannot keep adding more technology, better ways of doing things, and not reduce the cost. It doesn't make sense. If you did this in your private business, you'd be out of business. You can't spend $1 million on technology upgrades to make things go better and spend more than that in your annual outlay to run your business. You spend money to reduce your overhead. We just added 6 new positions in. One of the positions, I think, is a direct end run around this council's decision last year, and that's the position for the election office. The election office needs help, but it doesn't need people. It just needs help. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just one announcement. There will be a committee headed by Mr. Keller, Ms. Wakis, and Mr. Perry that will begin discussion review of the manager's employment agreement. So that'll be starting. Other than that, we have a motion for adjournment.
Could I ask a question before we adjourn?
Sure.
We did have another campaign event in the area, and I understand that our sheriff's department was called to help out with that. Are we submitting a bill to someone for those services?
My understanding is we are not, because this, in addition to the previous events, we were asked by the campaign committee. In this event, we were asked by the Secret Service. So when the Secret Service asks, it's a law enforcement request, which is not charged.
Okay. Thank you.
As opposed to if it's a campaign, it's more of a security type of thing.
Motion adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Have a good week.